Hello, hello. Welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your host, Keegan. Now, today, my friends, I want to talk about a little something that we all go through. And like everything else on this podcast, everyone goes through this at some point or another. And for some, it's constant, or at least seems constant. And then for others, there's a nice little lull, if you will, in between these happenstances. Happenstance is either internal, external, both, and some of them are factors that you can or cannot control. Now, if you're wondering what I'm talking about change. Everyone goes through a sense of change, and honestly, it's just a part of life. If everything were the constant day in and day out, we wouldn't really grow. Only would we not really grow, we'd be pretty miserable. Well, some of us, I suppose, and others maybe not so much. I say that because, well, I don't know about you, but there's plenty of things that are in my past that I'm glad I don't have to deal with anymore. For example, alcoholism. Like, I have to deal with it in a daily manner, but it's through working steps and a program and going to counseling, checking on my mental health, and having a support system that is active and around me. And that's just one of the few things I have to keep a track of. But again, this is something that is actively in the past. In the here and now, it's not so much of a factor, but it is something I have to keep an eye on because, well, it is part of my past. If it wasn't for this part of me or part of my experience, I wouldn't be where I am now. But again, there had to be a change to actually get me to where I am today. And that goes for you as well. And if you think not really, well, yeah, like I know it's a silly question, but some of us are on the inside, and that's okay. Now, for the rest of us, what really happens is we grow up, and some of us, we learn how to act in public better than others. Some of us shed just our whole identity, our health, just to go into a cocoon, if you will, and or a chrysalis, and actually come out as a different being. Now, sometimes that doesn't really work, as well. I'm sure you can think of a few instances of your own life that has made you kind of go like, yeah, think that was a bad idea. Yeah, not doing that again. Because if you're like me, I got a lot of those instances. And at that point, I don't even know if it's really an instance as much as it is well, a fact of life, rather. Now, change is inevitable. And it's one of those things that the more we fight it, the harder it is to actually progress and grow into it. The whole thing actually change is that we have to change, and a lot of the time it has to come from a deep, actual, like, rooted feeling of changing everything that we know from the inside out. And sometimes the outside affects the inside, and again, this is just part of life. A lot of us, we really don't know how to deal with change, but that's not because we don't want to. A lot of us were just never taught how to handle it. As with many things that we have to deal with in life, they don't really teach it in school. And maybe they kind of do, but not directly. So you have, as you're going through school, a different grade. You go up a class, maybe you get held back. That's a change. You go to geometry one year and then algebra 2 the next. That's another change. But the thing is, it it is a change of growth. It is something that builds on top of the other parts of the past to create a more full and richer experience. And so with that, we have to keep in mind that there's always something in the past that we can grab from to bring to the present and enhance our experience. Now, sometimes this enhancement is, well, maybe not so much an enhancement as it is well, a filler, if you will. A filler because, sometimes it's just nice to not have to change. And that's because we are creatures of habit. We are social creatures of habit that seem to like to stay kind of constant. But again, if everything were constant, if everything were the same day in, day out, year after year, after a decade, I'm pretty sure a lot of us would not be happy with where we're at. And that's okay. So, change is difficult, or for the most part, it is and or can be. But again, we have to have a support system from the inside out. You have to be there for yourself before anyone else is there for you. And if you're like me, I don't have a whole bunch of outside support. So a lot of it is actually self-sustaining, and that's why change can be difficult for someone like myself. I sit there and I don't have a lot of the outside support. And so whenever the inside starts to get a little shaky, it just makes it 10 times worse because I don't know what to do all the time, and I don't have people I can go and ask how to handle a certain situation. Now, that isn't entirely true through and through, but that is the majority of my experience. Nowadays, I do have more support, and I do have different people I can ask about different things. So this makes a little bit of change easier and sometimes more manageable. And in the past, not opening up, not trying to find help, or things that would really just accentuate the growth process was a little bit more difficult because, well, I didn't want to change. And so that's why a lot of us actually get stuck in our ways because we don't like change. We like where we're at because we feel comfortable. But sometimes this comfort is actually a sense of false security. And maybe it's not false security. Maybe you're just genuinely happy where you're at, what you're doing, and who you're with. And if that's you, fantastic. Like, good. I'm happy for you. I wish I could be there. But for those of us that are not, we actually have to pursue a change. So again, sometimes change happens to us and sometimes we cause the change. And I don't know. Sometimes it feels like neither one is easy, but at the same time, I don't think either one is necessarily harder than the other. It's just different aspects have to be worked on from different angles. Now, let's look at a few of the things that actually make change difficult. One of the things is the fear of the unknown. Now, that is humans in a vast majority sense, is that we have a huge fear of the unknown. And this comes from not knowing what we can expect. We like to be able to ask a question and know the answer to it so that we may go and, well, pursue it. Because, like, if I know I'm going to get a job if I go apply to it, then I'm going to definitely go and apply because it's in the bag, right? Like, I'm going to get this, so might as well. But for the times where I'm not sure if I'm going to get the job because maybe I don't have the right experience, maybe I don't have the right references or forth, it's going to deter me just a little bit. So the resistance to change from the get-go really starts from the unknown. Again, if we know what to expect, if we know how to go about handling some changes, it makes it a little bit easier and manageable. Now, what we have to think about with this, though, is that a lot of us, and this is mostly for myself speaking, that I like that comfort. I like to know what to expect. I like to just be set in emotion that's like being in a lazy river, if you will. Because sitting there, I don't have to really expend myself. I don't have to like try very hard to get to where I want to go. But as in a lazy river, it's just going in a circle. And I can only do that so many times before I go, and yeah, I'm bored. And some of us don't get bored with that, and that's okay. And others, like myself, I need a sense of stimulation, but at the same time, I also suffer from wanting everything to be perfect and from the inside out. So if things aren't necessarily ideal, sometimes, like I said for myself, I will sit there and I will nitpick different things that are either different, they're scary, or just difficult to change and adapt to because I don't know how to go about it or what the best solution might be. Now, with this fear of the unknown comes loss of control. Change really oftenly means that we have to relinquish some of our control over a situation or experience. It can be difficult, and one of the things that is really a challenge for someone going into recovery from addiction or some kind of recovery from a mental illness or just having a bad patch in life. We'll sit there, and if we're in control, we usually feel pretty good. But whenever it can be scary because it goes right back into the fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen, so therefore, we're going to be a little resistant to it. Myself, again, is I I'm pretty sure that I'd be a little bit more comfortable, like flying a jet, if you will, as opposed to going on a roller coaster. And that really just directly ties into the loss of control. I'm on that roller coaster and it goes and does what it's going to do. And that's where it kind of gets funny because it actually is like I know where it's going to go. I know what it's going to do, this, that, or the other. But it's that loss of control that makes me hesitant to actually go and do it. That's why I think I would be a fantastic fighter jet pilot because, I control whenever I do a loop-de-loop or a corkscrew and barrel roll, whatever. But that's the thing, too, is that I don't have that kind of training, so I'm really just kind of speaking out. You know what I mean. Now, with this loss of control, the fear of the unknown comes about with changing our routines. And again, we are creatures of habit. We like to do the same thing day in, day out. And so that's why habits are hard to break and to make because it's time and consistency that really those or actually breaks them. But the thing is, with a routine, we're knowing what's going to happen. We are expecting what we're going to expect because we already know that we have control of the and we know what's going to happen. This kind of goes in line with your or nightly routine. Morning, you wake up, you maybe make coffee, make breakfast, get dressed, take a shower, brush your teeth, whatever have you. And then you get in your car and you go to work. Now, so your routine in the morning, fairly simple routine. You know what to expect. You have control over the situation. Then you get into the car, and now you kind of don't have control over the entirety of the situation. You are in control of your vehicle, yes, but you also cannot control the idiots around you and therefore possibly make you late for work. So that fear of the unknown, the loss of control, those kind of go into a daily change that it's not very consistent. And if it is, then, well, I'd say you're pretty lucky because I don't know about you, but whenever there's a bad backup on the sorry, but I mean, again, I'm from Amarillo, Texas, and that is a small but very spread out city, or a small city, whatever you want to call it. And I'm used to going from any point in town and getting to wherever I want in about 30 minutes, and that's giving me time to spare. Now, here in Dallas, it is much different. Uh, it can take me anywhere from 15 minutes, depending on where I start, or it can take me over an hour because of wrecks and just factors that are outside of my control. So that's why whenever something disrupts the morning routine of getting to work, it can make you feel like, or again, for me, it can make it seem going to be a bad day. And wake up, stub your toe, you're out of coffee and you thought you had some more, or maybe you do and you just don't have cream or sugar or whatever have you, and then you just keep going and it's one thing after another, and then you get into your car and the next thing you know you get hit or rear-ended, and then you're late to work, and then you get fired from work because you're late to work, and it's the third time in a row that that's happened, but over a course of 9 months. And so then you're sitting there having to go back home, and then your car breaks down, and then you get home, and you start looking for jobs, and then your internet goes out because, well, you missed work a couple of times, and now you don't have a paycheck because you don't have a job. You're out of a car. Now you have this, that, and the other. Now, if that sounds like a bit much, like an exaggeration, if you will, well, it's honestly not far from the truth for a lot of people. And I'm one of those that I can have these random weird circumstances happen in a rather seemingly silly way, and it just sucks because it's my experience. I know what I'm going through, and so whenever I express my concern over this, a lot of people will sit there and say, "Oh, it's nothing. Like, just that can't all happen at once and whatnot." And there's a lot of you out there that I know, and you're going, "Yeah, that was my Monday. Like, this, that, and the other happened." And that's whenever life really sucks because there's like no end. But you know what? There is an end somewhere. You do have to go through a little bit of a fire, but you'll make it. You just got to stay persistent and tenacious and go bark it up, Chihuahua. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go find some earlier. It's 3. Go, Chihuahua, go. Yeah. So, one of the other things, and this one is kind of a huge factor in change and why we're resistant, and that would be, well, kind of a lack of understanding, but rather the fear of failure. And that fear can be absolutely crippling. I know for myself that if I fear what's going to happen if that I'm not going to do good enough, it's enough of a factor that I will literally sit there and do nothing because it's like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and mess this up. So to come out on top, I'm not going to do anything because, well, I'm in control of the situation. I know what's going to happen, and I can't fail if I don't try. So I win through and through. And then at crap, I should have, could have, and wished I had done this or the other. And I bet a lot of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about because sometimes it's like, man, I really don't want to mess this up, so I'm just not going to try. Therefore, I won't mess up. And then you look back and you go, I messed up by not going and possibly messing up. Because, if I don't start, I can't not finish, right? So this fear of failure is pretty potent. It is something that a lot of us struggle with all the time. And this is one that people don't really talk about too much. And this is actually one of the ones that struck me as interesting because I'd never thought about it in this light, and I never knew about it until I was in the Men of Nehemiah for my alcoholism rehabilitation. And that would be the fear of success. Yeah, right? Like fear of failure. Okay, yeah, everyone knows that. Fear of success. Huh? Really? Like, people are afraid of that? And yeah, they really, really are. And think about it, too, because if you're actually successful at something, it changes up what you're doing too. It is another form of change that, for a little bit, you lose control. For a little bit, your routine gets disrupted. For a little bit, you don't really know what's going to happen. And again, that's just another form of fear, but just on the opposite side of the same coin. Because you were afraid to start, or you fail because you were afraid of success by starting. So it's again like if you don't try, you can't really fail, and therefore you don't really change anything. But then you're going to look back and say, man, I really should have tried that. Or, man, I knew that was going to be a good idea and I just didn't do it. So for myself, I'm one of those that I would rather regret the things that I do instead of the things that I don't do. Because, at the end of the day, I don't have to sit there and play the what if game. And that game sucks. I don't know if you know, but that game really, 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 yeah, bites the concrete. Yeah, I don't know if that's a term, but feel free to use it. Let's get the ball rolling. Bite some concrete. So, with the fear of failure, the fear of success, we may never actually realize our full potential and the benefits that we could have reaped from just trying and starting something. Now, one of the things that really comes about is so this lack of trust can be something as simple as you don't trust yourself, you don't trust the advice you've been given, you don't trust the contract that you signed with your new leasing apartment because, last place they took your security deposit even though you didn't leave anything in bad shape and you never had any service calls on your apartment. So therefore, why should you go apply for another apartment if they're just going to treat you the same way? So, that's just one of the things we have to look at. Here's a little bit of a tidbit for you. They do not trust, or you do not trust people. If you drive at all, or if you go outside of your house at all, you're actually experiencing and setting forth a form of trust. Because if you're on the highway, you're really trusting that other people don't just go and sit there and, decide to play bumper car with your car. Because, that's the only thing really keeping a lot of people from doing that is we all trust and respect the lines on the road and we don't want someone else to hit our car. So it is a form of trust in every day-to-day scenarios. And so if someone says, I don't trust anyone, and you see them get out of their car, well, they're maybe not entirely a liar, but they're also not entirely truthful with that either because they may not realize that they have to show some trust in that regard. Now, we've looked at some of the ways that change is difficult, and we probably all know about that to some degree. Now, if you have a mental illness, such as myself, or if you're wondering what change does to your mental health, let's look at a few things right quick. So, a change of mental health from change is, well, many factors, but they're all simple and kind of self-explanatory, but I thought common sense was common, and I've come to find out that common sense is a superpower nowadays. And so if you have it, congratulations. If you're wondering if you have it, you may not. So yeah, I'll let you draw the line on which side you stand. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Worry, it's not a big change. It's okay. You're in control. Yeah. Can get change and our mental health. One of the first and probably the biggest factors is stress itself. Stress is a huge factor in our day to day living and how we experience and actually go about handling different situations, or how we go about handling situations whenever we're stressed versus non stressed, right? So, one of the things that come with stress is the fight or flight response. Now, I also want to add in right there, a lot of people don't realize there's a third option, and it is freeze. So you have fight, flight, or freeze. So you got the which. So with fight, it's pretty obvious, right? You're going to fight and be resistant to. You're going to flight means you're not going to try at all. And then freeze, you're just going to also do nothing at all and just hope it all turns out for the better. And I mean, so, anyways, if we're looking fight aspect, we're looking at physical symptoms that are actually going to change with us. So this can include an increased heart rate, sweating, and muscle tension. So if you're wondering why you are always feeling like balled up, like in a bunch of stress, well, you probably are. And the thing is, our bodies and minds are super good at suppressing a lot of things. What they're not good at is actually taking care of that issue that we're ignoring. I mean, that's why we go to therapy and counseling, is because there's a lot of things that happen on the subconscious, on the psyche level, that are so deep and ingrained in us, we don't think anything of it because, well, it's just how we are, right? So if you find yourself having a bunch of muscle knots and tension, you're probably highly stressed all the time, and that's why massage feels good. It's because you're literally getting the stress out of you. Maybe not out, but out of those spots that you're unconsciously tensing up. So for guys, it's a lot in the shoulder. For women, it's in the neck. And I think just everyone goes through this. And this can also manifest itself as someone having to move their foot up and down while they're sitting, or just any kind of fidgeting, because it's actually a physical symptom of dealing with stress. So if we look at our emotional symptoms, we can actually get anxiety, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. And one of the things about concentrating is that sometimes you got to concentrate about concentrating, which that concentrating about your concentrating can interrupt your yeah, you know what I mean. It just can turn into a nasty little cycle that is self-defeating. Now, one of the other factors that is about on the mental level is depression. And it's kind of odd to think about, right? Like, you just had a little bit of a change, so why are you depressed? Well, easy. Look at it. So you just lost a loved one. You just lost a friend, a dog or cat, or any pet that you have, or you're moving so far away from everything that you know. Depression can sit and sink in really fast or really gradually, and you may not even realize it until you're like, man, I haven't left the house in like 3 months. Damn. It can be one of those that everyone else will see it before you do. But at the same time, if you're in a completely new area and don't know you yet, then yeah, it's not going to seem odd to them because guess what? They don't know you. And if you sit there and hide yourself away, they'll never get to know you. And right there, I think I'm talking to myself more. So you can disregard that. But if it applies to you, go ahead and take it with me because I've got to go and do something with that myself. Not right now, of course. I got this to finish up. And maybe I can help you with a little bit of change in your life. So, again, depression. One of the things you don't think about is that depression is a lower energy state. So this lower energy state is a lot like sleeping. And that's one reason why people that are depressed will lay in bed all the time. And sometimes people do try to go and be physically active, move around, go do something new, and everything like that because, it's the opposite of just laying around and doing nothing. However, at the same time, this depression, this low energy state, is easy to fall into because, again, it's low. It's kind of like whenever we're looking at the weather systems. If we're looking at a low pressure system, that's where all the storm is going to blow into because everything's trying to settle. It's kind of like how water is always trying to go back to the ocean, or electricity is always trying to find its way to ground. It's just lower, so it takes a lot less energy and therefore it's more sustainable over a long period of time. However, the thing is with that, if we don't actually go and exert some energy to bring energy back into ourselves, we're never actually going to break the cycle of depression. So, what we can do to help our mental health with changing is accepting the change. Like, yeah, that one doesn't sound too great, right? That one is just, yeah, sure. Yeah, I accept that my dog died. Yeah, that don't help. But that's kind of the thing, is that if you fight it all the time, you're probably never really going to get what you want or where you want to go. And so, okay, before I go too far into that, let's go ahead and just open this little box up. Not Pandora's box, but just a box. And not the Pandora like the jewelry. Look up Pandora's box. Anyways, now, with change, we can be resistant to it. Remember, we can fight, we can flight, we can freeze. But what we can do for some of the resistance of change are as follows. We have understanding the reasons for the change. If you know what is going on, what's going to happen, it's going to give you a little bit of trust. It's going to give you a little bit of power over the situation. It's going to make some clarity for understanding, and it's just going to be a little less of the unknown. So, actually understanding the reason and accepting it are going to go hand in hand in helping you through it. No, it won't make it entirely easy, but it will make it easier, especially on yourself. Because remember, if you are your own worst critic, your biggest judge, anything like that, you're going to have a hard time doing a lot of the things for yourself because you're your number one enemy. And your enemy to do better than you, right? So what do you do whenever you are you versus you? Yeah, okay. I'll let you do what you want. Now, again, with the understanding and accepting of the change, we can actually also be involved in the change process. And so this will come as a form of changing your major. It can come about as changing where you live because that's where you've always wanted to go. It can be of starting a new job. And that's the thing, is that if we initiate the change, we're more than likely already accepting it and a little bit more understanding of it. Now, necessarily mean everything is done, cut, and dry. So, after being involved in the change process, what we can look at is to focus on we can look onto the positive aspects of a change. This is going to give us a little bit more of a clarity, understanding, trust, and just uh, build up the support within ourselves of why this change is either necessary or undergoing what it's going through. And one that's probably the hardest for a lot of us to admit is support from others. Now, if you remember early on, I talked about how change can be really difficult, and a lot of it comes from support of others. And if you're like me, I don't have a lot of support on the outside, so I have to kind of build it up on the inside. And it's not that it is always going to be or whatever, but this external support is pretty crucial for a lot of things, because if you're always carrying your burdens all by yourself, yeah, you'll get tired, you get exhausted, you're going to become some more energy state, making you more prone to irritability, anger, depression, and just all in all, not having a good time. If you want to have a good time doing that, I don't know how you'll do it, but let me know, because sometimes I like to wallow in self-pity. And yeah, I mean, it's a negative self-aspect that I need to work on, but see, that's where I'm going to start the change, is I've accepted and understood that there's something that needs to be changed because it is a problem. So now that I've accepted it, I've started it, now I just have to take that action. And that's honestly going to be seeking support from the outside, because, well, a crack fixes itself. I mean, you might be able to fling water and it will stop the leak, but it, yeah, it, that's probably a really, really bad analogy. I'm sorry. But I want to also say this change in us becoming irritable, fidgety, depressed, or any of those other aspects that can make change difficult. One of the things that we can do is actually focus on relaxation techniques. Now, if you're already familiar with some relaxation techniques, that's good. And maybe you should share some of those with other people. But don't go about it pretentiously, because you're going to turn a lot of people off on that. If you know relaxation techniques, awesome. But if you're still having a hard time with some of the changes that are going on, why don't you look into some different ones? And ones that maybe focus on the body a little bit more, like a body map. Or maybe you need something that's in your head a little bit more, so do a mind map. Or if you need a hybrid, and just look up somatic experiences and relaxation techniques, because it's one life, everything is highly individualized, and just because it works for you or it works for someone else does not mean it's going to translate the same to you or to someone else. And that's where a lot of mental health actually comes from, is that if we sit there and we're always trying to fix someone else, well, first of all, that's not really going to happen, because if they don't want that change, if they don't want to be better for themselves, it's never going to happen. And it's very obvious whenever we're looking at someone in an addiction and recovery setting. If someone doesn't want to change, if someone doesn't want to accept the new, then it's just not going to happen. Not, they may do it for a little bit, but it's not going to be very long term, if at all. And I say this because, well, yeah, nah, themselves. Anyways, one of the with change is a lot of the unknown. So if we are actually changing and if we're understanding, accepting, and doing everything we can for that change, our depression is going to be a lot less likely. Our anxiety is going to be a lot more minimalized. And who knows, maybe anxiety is an actual motivator and a little bit of a jump starter for you. For me, it's kind of like, speed bump in the road, but it's probably more like a pothole that for like the whole front end of the car to go into. So it for me, I have to figure out ways around that pothole, and some people are like that too. It's for some, there's almost nothing that really seems to work. What we can do is we can manage it. Do we get maybe eventually, but that takes a lot of self-care and practice. And a lot of us are not our own best friends. And that's why it's important to learn how to do that because, well, there's a lot to learn and gain because guess what? Life can actually be pretty cool. It can be pretty interesting. It can be almost whatever you want it to be. But you're looking for outside factors to please the inside of you and make everything acceptable and whatnot, it's not going to work. And I'm saying this solely from my personal experience. If I'm sitting there looking for outside validation and acceptance to where and what I want to feel and be, it's not going to happen. And like it may happen, but it's going to be way short lived and it's not going to be very fulfilling because it's more of I'm trying a whole, right? And that's what causes a lot of people with addiction or mental illnesses to do. It's to go find something to cope, find something to plug a hole, find something to just do. And, sometimes for a little bit, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. And maybe it does work, and then eventually it doesn't. And so you just do more, and that's where we get a lot of bad cycles that just never really seem to stop. And again, the stopping comes wanting change. So, yeah, it can be difficult, it can be scary, it can be monumental to actually do for yourself. And that's why outside support is pretty nice, but you have to make it yourself to be the best for yourself. So, the human psyche is very interesting and very complex, and at the same time, really simple. But we just like to make everything complicated, or again, at least I do. So, y'all don't overthink or over worry anything. Let me take it. Like, just don't carry that stuff around. Just forget it. I can worry enough to probably power nation. Like if we could figure out a way to harness anxiety and just gut wrenching feelings and stuff like that, yeah, I'd be plugged up to a plant somewhere and just like, yeah. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about too. It's not fun. So whenever I'm actually feeling good, I like to make it the best that I can. And being bipolar really either helps or does not help on that. Whenever we're dealing with change, it's important to know that you are not alone. It may feel like you're alone, and it may feel like there's no end in sight. But that is one of the few things that we can really gain from seeking outside help and support. Other people can tell us where we might need to improve. They can tell us or suggest different perspectives that we can take a look at because we may be looking at some kind of picture, but we're looking at it from the wrong angle. So we don't realize that if we take a couple steps this way, it becomes a map. It's not just a weird picture of terrain. It's an actual map. Like, hey, this is where you go. This is how you do it, so on and so forth. And we just have to be willing to accept and ask for the help in the first place. Now, change, again, it can be monumental or it can be very subtle and or very just so small that you don't really think about it. So if we're dealing with a huge change, like moving to another nation or changing your major in college or anything like that, what we can do is, and yeah, I know it sounds like intuitive, but again, common sense is not very common nowadays. So, things that we can do for ourselves whenever it comes to change is to break it into smaller parts. This change that we experience on a smaller level makes it bite size. It kind of goes with that whole joke of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's really the way a lot of life is. But because of the hustle and bustle and the expectations and the perceptions that we always have to be in a hurry to get instant satisfaction, gratification, this, that, or the other, it makes us go, oh, hey, there's a full buffet. I've got to get everything in one plate and do it all in one go. And you might be able to do that. If you can, you're probably not going to feel good after. And if you can and you do feel good after, well, yeah, I couldn't do that. What I have to do, I actually have to go and start off maybe mildly, but I can't sit there and load up my plate to the point of I can't even carry it to the table because then I have to eat while I'm standing at the food that I just last got, and there's not a sneeze shield around, so like, yeah. What we do is break it into those smaller bits. So we have to look at some things. And yeah, what we can do is break it down. So instead of 5 steps, we can take step 1 and we can break that into 5 other steps. And yes, it makes it seem like there's more to do with this change, but that's kind of the thing. If we don't break down this change, what's going to happen if we do change or attempt to, we're going to overlook a lot of things and you won't realize that something else changed that you didn't mean to happen until it may be too late. So again, we can have one step that has 5 different steps to it, 10, 20, so on and so forth. But if we take them one step at a time, it's going to be so gradual. It's just going to be a increase of weight at the gym. Yeah, you can do more reps or you can increase the weight, whichever one you want to do. And for some people, one way might be easier than the other. So you need to find your way that really makes it simpler for you. Because I'm not going to lie, it's never going to be simple. It's never going to be easy peasy okay. And if it is, then I don't really think you're going for a change. And if you legitimately are, also, congratulations, happy for you. I wish my life were like that. But, so what I have to do, I have to break it into smaller bits. I have to reward myself for that little bit of progress I make each and every time. But I also have to be careful in rewarding myself because that can be something that can easily turn into debauchery. It can easily turn into something that just builds and builds and builds. And I go, oh, yeah, that was a good reward. And I did a really small step, but I congratulated myself for 5 weeks on that one little thing. And now the rest of it, it's fallen off the cliff, right? But there's still some of it I can go do. But yeah, I'm okay with this reward system. I'm going to stay here. And guess what? Nothing happens. And for a lot of us, that's actually how addiction happened. It was so small and gradual that we didn't really know it was a problem until it was a problem. And by the time that happened, then so on and so forth. Next thing you know, it's 10 years and you're like, holy cannoli. Let's try to avoid that. And help someone else out too, because again, you never really know how someone is unless you ask them, but it's a two-way street there. You can ask, and if they tell you whatever they tell you, and you're like, okay, take it at face value. Well, Tim said he was good last day I saw him at work, and now he's in the hospital because whatever reason, and that's the thing. Asks you how you're doing, especially if it's coming in regarding a change that you're either actively going through or coming up on, be honest. I mean, maybe that person has a little bit of information or a different perception for you to utilize and therefore make it easier on you. And if they're asking how a change is actually going to affect you, guess what? That person probably actually cares about you, but they just don't outright say it. And that's kind of the thing too, is that we have to be open with each other. We have to be willing to accept and give help. We have to be willing to be blunt and honest sometimes, and sometimes we have to learn how to be a little bit more delicate with the way we deliver some messages. And this is all other parts of change, but it's changing in how we handle each other. We can handle ourselves, and yes, we can change how we do that, but sometimes the biggest change is the stuff that we put out, not what we take in. And this is obvious whenever you look at volunteer programs or food pantries or picking up trash off the side of the road. So many people do things on the outside for change that it actually affects everyone else. And so your change may be itty bitty to you, or it may be huge, monumental, but the thing is, we actually have to sit there and just recognize that what happens and what we do with our life will impact and affect other people. Yes, I know it's something that I wish didn't really happen, but it's something I've had to learn and work on changing because I've let so much on the outside affect the inside of me that I can't really change the inside of me until I change something on the outside. Now, it sounds almost counterintuitive, but it's kind of the way that this cycle works for myself. It may work for you or work for someone else that you know, but the thing is, it's going to be different. Again, I can only offer my experience, my perception, and information that other people give me. And so it's up to you to kind of use a little bit of discernment and say, hey, that could really work here. Or, hey, I never thought about that. Or, by all means, please say, wow, this guy's dumb. Like I'd rather you say that than maybe you can get a good laugh because you're listening to some dude just go on talking about change and all these things just do not apply to you. But it's not for me to say, it's not for me to dictate or anything like that. I want you to live your best life. I want you to be the best version of you. And we have to work on ourselves, with ourselves, and maybe with the help of others. So I wish nothing but the best for my audience, for my friends, my family, for anyone that isn't even watching or listening to this kind of stuff. Because you know what? I believe that people are inherently good. I believe that people are genuine and pure. And a lot of the time, it's just from a tainted world that really gets us to a sadistic, twisted. But at the same time, so many people want to actually do something positive with themselves and for others that it's nearly impossible for me to say that person because we don't really know what's going on. And again, we can ask them, and we can only go off of what they. So, if you actually genuinely ask someone how they're doing, and they give you a genuine response of like, "I am not doing good," please listen to that person. I'm not saying you have to go and try to fix their problem. What I am asking you to do is just to hear them out, just to listen. Make them feel understood. Because guess what? That's what most of us want this whole time, is to be understood, to be heard, and to have a voice. And it's hard to do that because no one else is giving you the opportunity. So be there for someone else, but also be there for yourself, because at the end of the day, have you always. You will be with you wherever you go, and maybe not if you have a lobotomy, but I wouldn't recommend that because, well, yeah, let's just say that those. Okay, so I don't know from personal experience, but I can attest to history that they're not the best thing. So it's kind of like, yeah. But with all of this, we can sit here and we can actually say that change is inevitable. Change is scary. And by it being scary, it's okay because guess what? A lot of life is highly unknown until you actually go and experience it. And then guess what? 5 times out of 6, it's probably going to be better than you thought it was. And maybe once out of 50, it's worse than you thought, or as bad as you did think. And then maybe like 10 times out of 60, it's not as bad as you thought, but it's better than you thought. But, just like a little mishmash of stuff. And again, that's just life for you. So with this, I want to say again to beautiful audience that is out there, thank you very much for listening to the ramblings of a madman for a little Irish lad. And I do want to ask, if you have any feedback, feel free to email me at keegan.read, R-E-A-D, at retrievingsanity.com. And also at the same time, give me feedback on what you want to hear me talk about. Give me some topics, and just maybe, and if you want, we could even have you on the show as a guest or co-host, and we can hear your story. We can hear what you have to tell the world, offer your strength, experience, and hope, and just help each other out as best as we can. So don't forget, check in next week at 7 in the morning on Friday, because, we all need a little bit of a nice start to the weekend. So I hope that your Friday goes well. I hope that your day goes well. I hope that everything is kind, and at the end of the day, you can smile and rest easy in bed. So until I see you next time, Shalom.